Question 1. The control framework reveals that a certified claims adjuster, CCA, has been handling claims using established procedures for several years. Recently, industry publications and professional development seminars have highlighted significant shifts in claims assessment methodologies and emerging regulatory interpretations impacting liability. The CCA feels overwhelmed by their current caseload and is hesitant to invest time in understanding these new developments, believing their current knowledge is sufficient for most situations. Which approach best aligns with the CCA's professional and ethical obligations? Option A. Proactively seek out and engage with new industry trends and regulatory updates through dedicated professional development, even when not immediately impacting current claims, to ensure continued competence and best practice. Option B. Focus solely on current claims, learning about new trends only when they directly and undeniably affect an ongoing claim, to maximize immediate efficiency. Option C. Prioritize personal convenience and familiar processes, deferring any learning about new trends until absolutely forced by a significant, unresolvable claim issue. Option D. Dismiss emerging trends as theoretical or overly complex, continuing to rely on established methods until a direct and unavoidable mandate for change arises. The correct answer is A. Proactively seek out and engage with new industry trends and regulatory updates through dedicated professional development, even when not immediately impacting current claims, to ensure continued competence and best practice. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common ethical dilemma faced by certified claims adjusters, CCA, regarding the imperative to stay current with industry trends. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the adjuster's immediate workload and comfort zone against their ongoing professional responsibility to maintain competence and ethical practice. The pressure to process claims efficiently can sometimes overshadow the less tangible, but equally critical, need for continuous learning and adaptation. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach involves proactively dedicating time and resources to professional development, even when not directly mandated by a specific claim. This demonstrates a commitment to upholding the standards of the profession, ensuring that the adjuster possesses the most up-to-date knowledge of relevant laws, regulations, and best practices in claims handling. This proactive stance is ethically justified by the CCA's duty to act with due care and diligence, and to maintain professional competence as outlined in professional conduct guidelines. Staying current ensures that claims are handled accurately, fairly, and in compliance with evolving legal and industry standards, ultimately protecting both the insured and the insurer. An approach that relies solely on learning about new trends only when they directly impact a current claim is ethically flawed. This reactive stance can lead to delays in claim resolution, potential misinterpretations of new regulations, and an inability to leverage emerging best practices for more efficient and effective claim handling. It fails to meet the standard of proactive competence expected of a CCA. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss emerging trends as irrelevant or overly complex without proper investigation. This demonstrates a lack of professional curiosity and a failure to engage with the evolving landscape of the insurance industry. Such an attitude can lead to outdated practices and a diminished ability to serve clients effectively, potentially violating ethical obligations to provide competent service. Finally, an approach that prioritizes personal convenience or avoids the effort of learning new trends over professional responsibility is a clear ethical failure. This prioritizes self-interest over the duty to maintain professional standards and act in the best interests of all parties involved in the claims process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to lifelong learning. Adjusters should regularly assess their knowledge gaps, allocate time for professional development activities such as attending webinars, reading industry publications, and participating in professional organizations, and integrate this learning into their daily practice. This proactive and continuous approach ensures that they remain competent, ethical, and effective in their role. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a complex multi-vehicle collision has occurred, involving significant property damage and potential injuries. As the Certified Claims Adjuster, CCA, assigned to this claim, you are tasked with determining the primary cause of the accident for claims settlement purposes. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for a CCA in this situation? Option A. Prioritize the reconstruction report submitted by the claimant's legal counsel, as it is typically prepared by an expert and aims to support their client's position. Option B. Accept the preliminary findings of the responding law enforcement officer as definitive, as their on-scene assessment is usually sufficient for claims adjustment purposes. Option C. Conduct an independent accident reconstruction, meticulously gathering all available evidence, including scene photographs, police reports, vehicle damage assessments, and witness statements, and applying established scientific principles to determine causation without bias. Option D. Base the determination of fault primarily on the initial statements provided by the involved drivers, assuming their accounts are the most direct and accurate reflection of events. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the reconstruction report submitted by the claimant's legal counsel, as it is typically prepared by an expert and aims to support their client's position. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because accident reconstruction, while rooted in scientific principles, often involves subjective interpretation and can be influenced by various external factors. As a certified claims adjuster, CCA, professional must navigate the complexities of determining fault and causation in a manner that is both factually accurate and compliant with regulatory standards. The core challenge lies in synthesizing technical data with legal and ethical obligations to arrive at a fair and defensible conclusion. The correct approach involves a thorough, unbiased investigation that prioritizes objective evidence and adheres strictly to established accident reconstruction methodologies. This includes meticulously documenting scene evidence, vehicle dynamics, and contributing factors, and then applying scientific principles to form a conclusion. This approach is justified by the CCA's duty to act with due diligence and good faith, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing claims handling. The CCA must ensure that their reconstruction findings are supported by credible evidence and are free from personal bias or external pressure, thereby upholding the integrity of the claims process and protecting the interests of all parties involved. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on witness statements without independent verification, or to selectively interpret evidence that favors a particular outcome. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a comprehensive and objective investigation. Another incorrect approach is to prematurely form a conclusion based on initial impressions or assumptions, neglecting the detailed analysis necessary for accurate reconstruction. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can lead to an unfair settlement or denial of a valid claim, violating ethical obligations and potentially contravening specific claims handling regulations. Furthermore, accepting a reconstruction report without critically evaluating its methodology or the qualifications of the investigator would be a failure to exercise professional judgment and could expose the insurer to liability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a commitment to impartiality. This involves gathering all relevant evidence, consulting with qualified experts when necessary, and applying established reconstruction techniques systematically. The process should include a critical review of all findings, considering alternative hypotheses, and documenting the rationale behind the final conclusion. This structured approach ensures that decisions are evidence-based, legally sound, and ethically defensible, aligning with the professional standards expected of a CCA. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that in a recent multi-vehicle collision, the initial police report assigns primary fault to driver A, but witness statements and vehicle data suggest driver B may have also contributed significantly to the incident. The Certified Claims Adjuster, CCA, is tasked with determining liability under the relevant jurisdiction's comparative fault laws, which approach best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional ethics for this scenario. Option A. Expedite the settlement process by assigning a predetermined percentage of fault to each party to avoid prolonged investigation and potential disputes. Option B. Assign liability to the party whose vehicle sustained the most significant damage, as this often correlates with the degree of impact. Option C. Solely rely on the police report to assign liability, as it represents the official initial assessment of the incident. Option D. Conduct a thorough investigation into all contributing factors and parties, applying the jurisdiction's comparative fault principles to apportion responsibility based on the totality of the evidence. The correct answer is C. Solely rely on the police report to assign liability, as it represents the official initial assessment of the incident. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims adjuster to navigate conflicting interpretations of fault in a multi-party accident, where the initial police report may not be the definitive determinant of liability. The adjuster must apply the relevant jurisdiction's comparative fault laws meticulously, considering all available evidence beyond the police report to accurately assign responsibility. This demands a deep understanding of legal principles and the ability to critically evaluate evidence. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of all contributing factors and parties, applying the principles of the specified jurisdiction's comparative negligence law. This means assessing the degree of fault for each party involved based on their actions or omissions that led to the accident. The justification for this approach lies in its adherence to the legal framework governing liability determination in the relevant jurisdiction, ensuring a fair and legally sound outcome. This aligns with the ethical duty of the adjuster to act with diligence and integrity, and the regulatory requirement to base liability decisions on established legal principles and evidence. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the police report fails to acknowledge that police reports are often preliminary and may not encompass all evidence or legal nuances. This can lead to an inaccurate assignment of liability, potentially disadvantaging one or more parties and violating the adjuster's duty to conduct a comprehensive investigation. Another incorrect approach that assigns liability based on the party with the most visible damage ignores the fundamental principle that liability is determined by fault, not by the extent of property damage. This approach is ethically unsound and legally indefensible, as it bypasses the established legal standards for determining negligence. A further incorrect approach that attempts to settle the claim quickly to avoid further investigation, without a proper determination of fault, demonstrates a failure to uphold professional responsibilities. This haste can result in unfair settlements and potential legal repercussions for the insurer and the adjuster, violating regulatory expectations for thoroughness and due diligence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a comprehensive review of all evidence, including witness statements, expert reports, and applicable traffic laws, in conjunction with the specific comparative fault statutes of the jurisdiction. This systematic process ensures that liability is determined based on established legal principles and factual findings, promoting fairness and compliance. Question 4. Compliance review shows that a claims adjuster is investigating a bodily injury claim and suspects the claimant may be exaggerating their injuries based on their social media activity. The adjuster has identified that the claimant has a private social media profile. Which of the following approaches best adheres to regulatory requirements and ethical best practices for social media investigations? Option A. Adjuster uses a third-party service to access the claimant's private social media messages and posts, believing this bypasses direct regulatory scrutiny. Option B. The adjuster attempts to log into the claimant's private social media account using common password guessing techniques to gain access. Option C. The adjuster requests explicit written consent from the claimant to access their private social media profile and reviews only the information provided, while also reviewing publicly available posts. Option D. The adjuster focuses solely on publicly available social media posts, making assumptions about the claimant's activities and ability to perform certain actions based on these posts. The correct answer is C. The adjuster requests explicit written consent from the claimant to access their private social media profile and reviews only the information provided, while also reviewing publicly available posts. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need to gather relevant evidence for a claim investigation with the imperative to adhere to strict privacy regulations and ethical guidelines concerning the use of social media data. The adjuster must navigate the complex legal landscape surrounding data privacy, consent, and the admissibility of evidence obtained from public and private social media profiles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that investigative methods are both effective and legally sound, avoiding any actions that could lead to regulatory penalties or compromise the integrity of the investigation. The correct approach involves obtaining explicit consent from the claimant before accessing any private social media information, and limiting the investigation to publicly available information unless consent is granted. This aligns with data privacy principles that emphasize transparency and consent. Specifically, Under many regulatory frameworks governing claims adjusting, unauthorized access to private digital information is prohibited. Furthermore, ethical guidelines for claims adjusters often mandate that investigations be conducted in a fair, honest, and transparent manner, respecting the claimant's privacy rights. Accessing private social media content without consent would violate these principles and potentially contravene laws related to data protection and privacy. An incorrect approach would be to access the claimant's private social media messages and posts without their explicit consent, even if the adjuster believes it is relevant to the claim. This action directly violates privacy laws and ethical standards by infringing on the claimant's expectation of privacy in their personal communications. Another incorrect approach would be to use information obtained from a third party who accessed the claimant's private social media without consent. This is problematic because it relies on illegally or unethically obtained information, and its use in the investigation would taint the entire process and potentially render the evidence inadmissible. A further incorrect approach would be to infer guilt or misrepresentation solely based on the claimant's public social media activity without corroborating evidence. While public posts can provide context, they are not definitive proof of fraud or misrepresentation, and relying solely on them can lead to biased conclusions and unfair claim handling. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of applicable privacy laws and regulations, as well as the insurer's internal policies regarding social media investigations. Adjusters should always prioritize obtaining informed consent for any access to private digital information. When investigating publicly available information, they must exercise caution to avoid making assumptions or drawing conclusions without sufficient supporting evidence. If there is any doubt about the legality or ethicality of an investigative step, the adjuster should consult with their supervisor or legal counsel before proceeding. Question 5. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a swift, albeit potentially lower, settlement offer might appear financially advantageous to the insurer in the short term. However, considering the regulatory framework for certified claims adjusters, CCA, what is the most appropriate course of action for a claims adjuster when presented with a complex claim where initial information suggests a potential for a lower payout, but further investigation is warranted? Option A. Immediately deny the claim based on preliminary findings without conducting a comprehensive investigation to avoid any payout and associated costs. Option B. Conduct a thorough and objective investigation, gathering all necessary documentation and expert opinions to accurately assess the claim's validity and value according to policy terms and regulatory requirements, and then communicate the findings and a fair settlement offer to the policyholder. Option C. Delay the investigation and settlement process indefinitely, citing ongoing complexities, to allow for further internal review and to potentially wear down the policyholder's resolve to pursue the claim. Option D. Proceed with the initial, lower settlement offer to expedite the claim closure and realize immediate cost savings for the insurer, assuming the policyholder may not have the resources or knowledge to contest it. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the initial, lower settlement offer to expedite the claim closure and realize immediate cost savings for the insurer, assuming the policyholder may not have the resources or knowledge to contest it. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the claims adjuster must balance the insurer's financial interests with the policyholder's right to a fair and prompt settlement, all while adhering to strict regulatory requirements. The adjuster's actions directly impact the policyholder's financial well-being and the insurer's reputation. Navigating potential conflicts of interest and ensuring compliance with the specific regulatory framework for certified claims adjusters, CCA, requires meticulous attention to detail and a strong ethical compass. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective investigation of the claim, accurate application of policy terms and conditions, and transparent communication with all parties. This aligns with the CCA's fundamental responsibility to act in good faith and fair dealing, as mandated by regulatory guidelines that emphasize promptness, fairness, and accuracy in claims handling. The adjuster must gather all necessary information, assess the damage or loss objectively, and communicate the settlement offer clearly, explaining the basis for the decision. This upholds the principles of integrity and professionalism expected of a CCA. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing the payout without a comprehensive investigation fails to meet the regulatory obligation for a fair assessment. This can lead to allegations of bad faith and unfair claims practices, violating the duty to investigate thoroughly and settle claims equitably. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy, leading to an incomplete or erroneous settlement, also breaches regulatory requirements. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can result in underpayment or overpayment, both of which have negative consequences and can lead to regulatory scrutiny. Furthermore, an approach that involves pressuring the policyholder into accepting a settlement without providing a clear explanation of the coverage and the basis for the offer is unethical and likely violates regulations concerning fair claims settlement practices and consumer protection. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the policy contract and applicable regulations. This involves a systematic process of information gathering, objective evaluation, and clear communication. When faced with complex claims or potential disputes, adjusters should consult internal guidelines, legal counsel if necessary, and always prioritize adherence to the spirit and letter of the law and ethical codes of conduct. The focus should always be on achieving a fair and compliant outcome for all parties involved. Question 6. Market research demonstrates that effective claims handling relies heavily on accurate and ethically obtained witness statements. A claims adjuster is investigating a complex property damage claim and needs to interview a neighbor who may have witnessed the incident. The adjuster is aware that the neighbor is a key witness, but is also known to be somewhat reluctant to engage with insurance companies. What is the most appropriate and regulatory compliant approach for the claims adjuster to take when initiating contact and conducting the interview? Option A. The adjuster should clearly identify themselves, explain the purpose of the interview, and obtain the neighbor's voluntary consent before proceeding with questions, ensuring all statements are recorded accurately and objectively. Option B. The adjuster should approach the neighbor without initial identification and subtly probe for information, hoping to gain their trust before revealing their role as an insurance adjuster. Option C. The adjuster should conduct a brief, informal chat with the neighbor, focusing only on details that seem to directly support the claimant's version of events, and omit any potentially contradictory information from their notes. Option D. The adjuster should inform the neighbor that their statement is mandatory for the claim's processing and that non-cooperation could negatively impact the claimant's outcome. The correct answer is A. The adjuster should clearly identify themselves, explain the purpose of the interview, and obtain the neighbor's voluntary consent before proceeding with questions, ensuring all statements are recorded accurately and objectively. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims adjuster to balance the need for thorough investigation with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding witness interviews. The adjuster must gather all relevant information to accurately assess the claim, while respecting the rights and privacy of individuals involved. Failure to adhere to proper procedures can lead to inadmissible evidence, legal repercussions, and damage to the insurer's reputation. The correct approach involves conducting interviews in a manner that is both comprehensive and compliant with regulatory requirements. This means clearly identifying oneself, explaining the purpose of the interview, and obtaining consent where necessary. It also entails asking open-ended questions to elicit detailed responses and documenting the interview accurately and objectively. This approach ensures that the information gathered is reliable, admissible in legal proceedings, and obtained ethically, thereby upholding the principles of fairness and due diligence mandated by regulatory frameworks. An incorrect approach that involves coercing a witness into providing a statement under duress is ethically reprehensible and legally unsound. This violates the principle of voluntary testimony and can render the statement inadmissible. Furthermore, it can lead to accusations of intimidation and professional misconduct, potentially resulting in disciplinary action and legal penalties. Another incorrect approach, which is to conduct the interview without clearly identifying oneself or the purpose of the inquiry, undermines transparency and trust. This can lead to suspicion and reluctance from the witness, compromising the quality and completeness of the information obtained. It also fails to meet the ethical standard of informing individuals about how their information will be used, which is a cornerstone of responsible data handling and investigation. A third incorrect approach, which is to selectively record only parts of the interview that support a predetermined outcome, constitutes a misrepresentation of the facts and a breach of professional integrity. This practice distorts the truth can lead to an inaccurate claim assessment and is a serious ethical violation. It demonstrates a lack of objectivity and a failure to conduct a fair and impartial investigation, which are fundamental duties of a claims adjuster. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance, ethical conduct, and thoroughness. This involves understanding the specific legal and regulatory requirements governing claims investigations in their jurisdiction, including rules around evidence gathering and witness interviews. They should always act with integrity, objectivity, and respect for all parties involved. When in doubt, seeking guidance from legal counsel or senior management is a prudent step to ensure all actions are appropriate and compliant. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that effective initial claim contact significantly impacts claimant satisfaction and claims resolution efficiency. A certified claims adjuster, CCA, receives notification of a new auto accident claim. Considering the regulatory framework and best practices for initial claim contact and documentation, which of the following approaches best balances prompt engagement with thorough information gathering? Option A. Reach out to the claimant only after a comprehensive accident reconstruction report has been obtained and reviewed. Option B. Delay initial contact with the claimant until all internal policy review and subrogation potential assessments are fully completed. Option C. Contact the claimant immediately to gather preliminary details about the accident, confirm policy information, and outline the next steps in the claims process, while also noting any immediate documentation needs. Option D. Initiate contact with the claimant solely to request a signed proof of loss form and any available repair estimates. The correct answer is C. Contact the claimant immediately to gather preliminary details about the accident, confirm policy information, and outline the next steps in the claims process, while also noting any immediate documentation needs. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims adjuster to balance the need for prompt initial contact with the claimant against the imperative to gather accurate and complete information from the outset. Failing to contact the claimant promptly can lead to dissatisfaction and potential regulatory scrutiny for delays. Conversely, rushing the initial contact without adequate preparation can result in incomplete documentation, leading to errors, increased claim duration, and potential financial repercussions for the insurer. The adjuster must exercise judgment to ensure both efficiency and thoroughness. The correct approach involves proactively reaching out to the claimant within the established service level agreements, SLAs, or regulatory timeframes, armed with a clear understanding of the policy and the initial claim details. This allows for a structured conversation, ensuring all necessary preliminary information is gathered, policy coverage is preliminarily assessed, and the claimant's immediate concerns are addressed. This aligns with regulatory expectations for timely claim handling and good faith practices, which mandate prompt and fair claims administration. It also sets a professional tone for the entire claims process. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate, unstructured contact without reviewing policy details or preparing a list of necessary information risks superficial engagement. This can lead to the adjuster failing to ask critical questions, missing vital documentation requirements, and providing inaccurate preliminary advice to the claimant. Such an approach could violate regulatory requirements for thorough investigation and could be seen as a failure to act in good faith, potentially leading to claims disputes and regulatory sanctions. Another incorrect approach that delays initial contact until all internal reviews are completed, even if those reviews are not strictly necessary for the initial conversation, fails to meet the claimant's expectation of timely communication. This delay can be perceived as neglect or indifference, potentially damaging the insurer's reputation and violating regulatory mandates for prompt claim initiation. It also misses the opportunity to gather crucial initial information directly from the claimant while the events are fresh in their mind. A further incorrect approach that focuses solely on obtaining a signed proof of loss form during the initial contact, without a broader discussion of the claim's circumstances, policy provisions, and next steps is overly narrow. While a proof of loss is important, it is typically a later stage document. Prioritizing it at the very first contact can be premature, may not capture all necessary details, and can overwhelm the claimant. This approach neglects the broader duty to investigate and communicate effectively from the outset. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the relevant regulatory framework and internal SLAs for initial contact and claim handling. 2. reviewing the policy details and any initial claim notification to prepare for the conversation. 3. Prioritizing a prompt, yet structured, initial contact that gathers essential information, assesses preliminary coverage, and manages claimant expectations. 4. Documenting all interactions and information gathered meticulously. 5. Escalating complex issues or requiring further investigation as needed. Question 8. The control framework reveals that a certified claims adjuster, CCA, is investigating a property damage claim where the policy contains a specific exclusion for damage caused by flooding. The claimant insists the damage was due to a burst pipe, but evidence suggests the water ingress originated from an external source consistent with a flood event. The adjuster has a duty to the claimant to investigate thoroughly and to the insurer to adhere to policy terms. Which of the following approaches best balances these duties while adhering to regulatory compliance? Option A. Conduct a detailed investigation into the source of the water damage, document all findings meticulously, and clearly communicate to the claimant how the policy's flood exclusion applies to the evidence gathered, offering settlement only for covered damages. Option B. Advise the claimant to seek legal counsel immediately and defer all decision-making to them, regardless of the clarity of the policy terms and investigation results. Option C. Interpret the policy exclusion broadly to cover the claimant's situation, even if the evidence is ambiguous, to ensure a swift and satisfactory resolution for the insured. Option D. Inform the claimant that the damage is not covered due to the flood exclusion, without providing a detailed explanation of the investigation findings or the specific policy language. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed investigation into the source of the water damage, document all findings meticulously, and clearly communicate to the claimant how the policy's flood exclusion applies to the evidence gathered, offering settlement only for covered damages. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a claimant's perceived entitlement and the insurer's obligation to adhere strictly to policy terms and regulatory mandates. The adjuster must navigate this tension while upholding principles of fairness, accuracy, and compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the claims settlement process is both equitable for the insured and legally sound for the insurer, avoiding any actions that could be construed as misrepresentation or bad faith. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective investigation of the claim, followed by a clear and transparent communication of the policy's coverage limitations and the adjuster's findings. This aligns with the Certified Claims Adjuster, CCA, regulatory framework, which emphasizes the importance of accurate claim assessment, adherence to policy provisions, and fair dealing with the insured. Specifically, it reflects the CCA's duty to act with integrity and to ensure that all claims are handled in accordance with applicable laws and policy contracts, thereby protecting both the insured and the insurer from undue risk and potential disputes. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying or misrepresenting the policy exclusions to appease the claimant would constitute a violation of the CCA's ethical obligations and regulatory requirements. This action could lead to a breach of contract, regulatory sanctions for misrepresentation, and damage to the insurer's reputation. Similarly, an approach that rigidly applies exclusions without considering any potential ambiguities or extenuating circumstances, and without offering a clear explanation, could be seen as a failure to act in good faith, potentially leading to disputes and legal challenges. Finally, an approach that prioritizes expediency over accuracy by making a settlement offer without a complete investigation would violate the core principles of claims adjusting, potentially resulting in underpayment or overpayment of claims and failing to meet regulatory standards for due diligence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the policy contract and all relevant regulations. This is followed by a diligent and unbiased investigation of the facts. Communication should be clear, honest, and timely, explaining both coverage and limitations. Any settlement offer must be based on a thorough assessment of the claim's validity and the policy's terms, ensuring compliance with all regulatory and ethical standards. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that when estimating repair costs for a residential property following a covered peril, an adjuster must consider various methodologies. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of fair and accurate claims settlement as typically mandated by regulatory frameworks for certified claims adjusters? Option A. Solely relying on the bid provided by a contractor chosen by the policyholder without independent verification. Option B. Estimating based on the cheapest available materials or the lowest labor rates, regardless of policy requirements for quality. Option C. Utilizing a detailed scope of damage and applying industry-standard estimating software or price lists, adjusted for local market conditions. Option D. Employing outdated price lists, or generic regional averages, without considering specific local market fluctuations. The correct answer is C. Utilizing a detailed scope of damage and applying industry-standard estimating software or price lists, adjusted for local market conditions. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because estimating repair costs for a damaged property requires a delicate balance between accurately reflecting the loss and adhering to regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. The adjuster must navigate the complexities of material availability, labor costs, and potential for hidden damage, all while ensuring their estimate is fair and justifiable to both the policyholder and the insurer. The core challenge lies in developing an estimate that is both comprehensive and cost-effective, avoiding both underpayment and overpayment. The correct approach involves utilizing a detailed scope of damage and applying industry-standard estimating software or price lists, adjusted for local market conditions. This method is correct because it provides a systematic and objective basis for calculating repair costs. Regulatory frameworks for certified claims, adjusters typically mandate that estimates be based on actual cash value or replacement cost, as defined by the policy, and that they reflect the cost to repair or replace damaged property with materials of like kind and quality. Using established estimating tools and local pricing data ensures compliance with these principles by providing a transparent and defensible basis for the estimate. This approach upholds the ethical duty to act in good faith and fair dealing by ensuring the policyholder receives a fair settlement. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a contractor's bid without independent verification. This is professionally unacceptable because it abdicates the adjuster's responsibility to independently assess and estimate the loss. It risks accepting inflated costs or overlooking necessary repairs, potentially violating the duty to both the policyholder by underpaying and the insurer by overpaying. Furthermore, it may not align with the policy's terms regarding how damages are to be valued. Another incorrect approach is to use outdated price lists or generic regional averages without considering specific local market fluctuations. This is ethically and regulatorily flawed because it fails to accurately reflect the current cost of materials and labor in the affected area. Such an approach can lead to an inaccurate estimate, potentially resulting in an unfair settlement for the policyholder and a deviation from the insurer's obligation to indemnify. A third incorrect approach is to estimate based on the cheapest available materials or the lowest labor rates, regardless of whether they meet the policy's requirement for like kind and quality. This is a direct violation of policy terms and ethical obligations. The adjuster's role is to determine the cost of restoring the property to its pre-loss condition with comparable materials and workmanship, not to find the least expensive way to perform the repairs. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough inspection of the damaged property to identify all affected areas and components. This should be followed by a detailed scope of work. The adjuster should then utilize approved estimating software or resources that incorporate current, localized pricing for materials and labor. Any deviations from standard pricing should be well documented and justifiable. The estimate should be reviewed for completeness and accuracy, ensuring it aligns with policy provisions and regulatory requirements. Finally, the estimate should be communicated clearly and transparently to the policyholder. Question 10. The control framework reveals that a claims adjuster is investigating a motor vehicle accident where the claimant alleges the other driver was solely at fault. However, initial evidence suggests the claimant may have been exceeding the speed limit at the time of the collision. In this jurisdiction, the law mandates a system of comparative negligence. Which of the following actions by the adjuster best reflects adherence to regulatory requirements and professional standards for handling this claim? Option A. Immediately propose a settlement based on a 50/50 split of fault, assuming this is a common outcome in such cases, without detailed evidence of the claimant's contribution. Option B. Advise the claimant that due to their potential speeding, their claim will be denied outright, regardless of the other driver's actions. Option C. Recommend full payment of the claimant's damages without further investigation into the claimant's speed, as the other driver initiated the lane change that led to the accident. Option D. Conduct a thorough investigation into the claimant's speed and other contributing factors, and then apply the jurisdiction-specific comparative negligence statute to apportion fault and adjust the awarded damages accordingly. The correct answer is C. Recommend full payment of the claimant's damages without further investigation into the claimant's speed, as the other driver initiated the lane change that led to the accident. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because the adjuster must navigate the complexities of comparative negligence without overstepping their authority or misapplying the relevant legal principles. The adjuster's role is to assess damages and liability based on established facts and legal standards, not to unilaterally determine fault in a manner that usurps judicial or jury functions. The core challenge lies in accurately applying the jurisdiction-specific comparative negligence rules to the facts presented, ensuring fairness to all parties while adhering strictly to regulatory guidelines. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting all evidence related to the actions of each party involved in the incident. This includes gathering witness statements, reviewing police reports, and obtaining expert opinions where necessary. The adjuster must then apply the jurisdiction-specific comparative negligence statute to apportion fault based on the evidence. This means understanding whether the jurisdiction follows pure comparative negligence, modified comparative negligence, 50% or 51% rule, or another variation. The adjuster's final recommendation or determination of damages must reflect this apportionment, ensuring that the claimant's recovery is reduced by their percentage of fault, as dictated by law. This approach is correct because it aligns with the adjuster's duty to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation, apply the law accurately, and make a determination that is legally sound and ethically defensible within the regulatory framework. An incorrect approach would be to assign a percentage of fault based on personal opinion or a generalized sense of fairness, without a clear evidentiary basis or a direct application of the jurisdiction's comparative negligence statute. This fails to adhere to the legal standard and could lead to an unfair outcome for one or both parties. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the concept of comparative negligence altogether and recommend full recovery for a claimant who demonstrably contributed to their own damages. This directly violates the principles of comparative negligence as established by law and would likely result in a regulatory violation and potential legal challenge. A third incorrect approach would be to prematurely settle the claim without a proper assessment of comparative fault, especially if the evidence strongly suggests the claimant bears some responsibility. This bypasses the necessary legal analysis and could lead to an overpayment of the claim, exposing the insurer to financial risk and potentially violating claims handling regulations. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, thoroughly investigate and gather all relevant facts. Second, identify the applicable comparative negligence rules for the specific jurisdiction. Third, analyze the gathered evidence in light of these rules to determine the percentage of fault for each party. Fourth, calculate damages, adjusting for the claimant's percentage of fault as required by law. Finally, communicate the findings and proposed resolution clearly and transparently to all involved parties, referencing the legal basis for the apportionment of fault. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that the insured's personal property was a total loss due to a fire. The insured has provided a list of items they wish to purchase as replacements, along with their current retail prices. As a certified claims adjuster, CCA, which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations for determining the settlement amount for these items? Option A. Use a standardized depreciation percentage for all categories of personal property, regardless of the specific item's condition or expected lifespan. Option B. Determine the actual cash value (ACV) of the lost items by calculating their replacement cost new and then applying a deduction for depreciation based on their age, condition, and obsolescence. Option C. Offer a settlement based on the depreciated value of the damaged items, without considering the cost of acquiring new replacements. Option D. Settle for the full replacement cost of the new items as listed by the insured, as this reflects their desire to replace the lost property. The correct answer is D. Settle for the full replacement cost of the new items as listed by the insured, as this reflects their desire to replace the lost property. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the adjuster to navigate the nuances of personal property valuation in the context of a total loss, balancing the insured's desire for replacement with the insurer's obligation to indemnify based on fair market value, all while adhering to specific regulatory requirements. The adjuster must exercise careful judgment to avoid underpayment, which could lead to regulatory scrutiny and bad faith claims, or overpayment, which impacts the insurer's financial stability. The correct approach involves determining the actual cash value of the damaged personal property at the time of the loss. This typically involves establishing the replacement cost of a comparable new item and then applying a deduction for depreciation. Depreciation accounts for the item's age, condition, and obsolescence. This methodology aligns with the principle of indemnity, which aims to restore the insured to their pre-loss financial position, not to provide a windfall. Regulatory frameworks for certified claims adjusters, CCA, mandate that settlements be based on fair and reasonable valuations, which ACV with depreciation represents. Ethical obligations require the adjuster to be fair and impartial, ensuring the insured is compensated for their actual loss. An incorrect approach would be to simply agree to the insured's demand for the full replacement cost of new items without considering depreciation. This fails to adhere to the principle of indemnity and the regulatory requirement to value property at its ACV. Ethically, this could be seen as an overpayment that is not justified by the loss sustained. Another incorrect approach would be to offer a settlement based solely on the depreciated value of the damaged items, without accounting for the fact that the insured will likely need to purchase new items to replace them. ACV is the basis. The practical reality for the insured is often the need to acquire replacements. Some jurisdictions may have specific provisions or interpretations that require consideration of replacement cost less depreciation, but the initial offer should reflect the ACV. Offering only a fraction of the replacement cost without a clear path to replacement for the insured, or without offering the difference between ACV and replacement cost if the policy allows, would be problematic. A third incorrect approach would be to use an outdated or arbitrary depreciation schedule that does not accurately reflect the condition or lifespan of the specific items lost. This would lead to an inaccurate valuation, potentially underpaying the insured and violating regulatory requirements for fair and reasonable settlements. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence and fairness. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a systematic approach. First, thoroughly documenting the damaged property and its condition. Second, researching the market value of comparable new items. Third, applying appropriate depreciation based on the item's age, wear and tear, and obsolescence, using established guidelines or expert opinion where necessary. Fourth, calculating the ACV. And fifth, communicating the valuation methodology clearly and transparently to the insured, explaining how the settlement amount was determined in accordance with policy terms and regulatory requirements. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that a significant portion of claims adjusters are utilizing a standardized, age-based depreciation schedule for all roofing materials, irrespective of their actual condition or remaining useful life at the time of the loss. This practice is being implemented to streamline the claims process and reduce processing time. Considering the Certified Claims Adjuster (CCA) regulatory framework, which of the following approaches to depreciation calculation is most aligned with professional and ethical obligations? Option A. Calculating depreciation based on the observed condition and estimated remaining useful life of the specific roofing materials, as supported by inspection findings and industry standards. Option B. Using a depreciation schedule that factors in projected future obsolescence and technological advancements beyond the current condition of the materials. Option C. Applying a uniform, predetermined depreciation percentage for all roofing materials of a similar age, as dictated by internal company guidelines for efficiency. Option D. Waiving depreciation entirely for roofing materials to expedite claim settlement and enhance customer satisfaction. The correct answer is A. Calculating depreciation based on the observed condition and estimated remaining useful life of the specific roofing materials, as supported by inspection findings and industry standards. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims adjuster to balance the need for accurate depreciation calculations with the potential for claimant dissatisfaction and the insurer's financial interests. The adjuster must navigate the complexities of applying depreciation principles in a way that is both compliant with regulatory standards and ethically sound, ensuring fairness to the policyholder. Careful judgment is required to avoid overdepreciating an item, which could lead to an inadequate settlement, or underdepreciating it, which could result in an overpayment. The correct approach involves applying depreciation based on the actual observed condition and remaining useful life of the damaged property, consistent with the policy terms and relevant regulatory guidelines for depreciation. This method ensures that the depreciation reflects the real-world wear and tear, obsolescence, or damage that existed prior to the loss. This aligns with the principle of indemnity, which aims to restore the insured to their pre-loss financial position. No more and no less. Regulatory frameworks typically mandate that depreciation be reasonable and not arbitrary, and that it be applied consistently. Ethical practice dictates transparency with the policyholder regarding how depreciation is calculated and applied. An incorrect approach that relies solely on a predetermined, fixed percentage of depreciation for all items of a certain age, regardless of their actual condition, fails to meet the requirement of reasonableness and may violate the principle of indemnity. This approach can lead to an unfair settlement if the item was in better condition than the fixed percentage suggests. Another incorrect approach that ignores depreciation altogether, treating the damaged item as if it were new, would result in an overpayment and a violation of the policy's indemnity provisions, as well as potentially breaching regulatory requirements against unjust enrichment. A third incorrect approach that uses an overly aggressive depreciation schedule based on speculative future obsolescence, rather than current condition and remaining useful life, is also ethically questionable and likely non-compliant with regulations that require depreciation to be based on observable factors. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the policy contract and applicable regulations. They should then conduct a detailed inspection of the damaged property to assess its pre-loss condition, age, and remaining useful life. This assessment should inform the depreciation calculation, ensuring it is reasonable, justifiable, and transparent. Open communication with the policyholder throughout this process is crucial to build trust and ensure understanding of the settlement. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for exaggeration in a worker's compensation claim. The adjuster is considering employing surveillance to verify the claimant's reported limitations. Which of the following surveillance techniques, if implemented strictly within the bounds of the Certified Claims Adjuster (CCA) regulatory framework, would be the most professionally appropriate and legally defensible? Option A. Engaging a private investigator to conduct discreet, non-intrusive observation of the claimant's activities in public spaces, documenting only what is readily observable without any attempt to gain access to private property or engage the claimant. Option B. Hiring a third party to impersonate a friend or acquaintance of the claimant to elicit information about their condition and daily routines. Option C. Setting up hidden cameras on the claimant's property without their knowledge or consent to monitor their movements and activities. Option D. Posing as a potential customer to gain entry into the claimant's private residence to observe their daily activities and assess their physical capabilities. The correct answer is A. Engaging a private investigator to conduct discreet, non-intrusive observation of the claimant's activities in public spaces, documenting only what is readily observable without any attempt to gain access to private property or engage the claimant. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the claims adjuster to balance the need to investigate a potentially fraudulent claim with the imperative to conduct surveillance ethically and legally, adhering strictly to the Certified Claims Adjuster (CCA) regulatory framework. The adjuster must navigate the complexities of evidence gathering without infringing upon an individual's privacy rights or engaging in deceptive practices that could jeopardize the investigation's integrity or lead to legal repercussions. Careful judgment is paramount to ensure that surveillance is proportionate, necessary, and conducted in a manner that respects all applicable laws and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves utilizing surveillance techniques that are legally permissible and ethically sound, focusing on objective observation and factual reporting. This method upholds the adjuster's duty to investigate thoroughly while respecting the claimant's rights. Specifically, this approach aligns with regulatory frameworks that permit discrete observation of public activities and the collection of publicly available information. The justification lies in its adherence to privacy laws, avoidance of entrapment, and commitment to factual evidence, all of which are foundational to professional claims adjusting and are implicitly or explicitly mandated by CCA guidelines and relevant statutes governing investigative practices. An incorrect approach that involves misrepresenting oneself to gain access to private property or information is ethically unacceptable and likely violates privacy laws and regulations governing investigative conduct. Such actions can be construed as trespass or invasion of privacy, leading to legal penalties and undermining the credibility of the adjuster and the insurer. Another incorrect approach, such as fabricating evidence or manipulating circumstances to elicit a specific behavior from the claimant, constitutes fraud and is a severe ethical breach. This not only violates the CCA's Code of Conduct, but also potentially criminal statutes related to obstruction of justice or fraud. It fundamentally compromises the integrity of the claims process and the adjuster's professional standing. Finally, an approach that involves excessive or unwarranted surveillance beyond what is reasonably necessary to verify the claim's legitimacy can be deemed an invasion of privacy. Even if conducted in public spaces, prolonged or intrusive surveillance without clear justification can lead to complaints and legal challenges, demonstrating a failure to exercise professional discretion and adhere to proportionality principles inherent in ethical investigations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory framework, including privacy laws and specific CCA guidelines on investigative practices. The adjuster must first assess the necessity and proportionality of surveillance. If surveillance is deemed necessary, the chosen techniques must be legal, ethical, and minimally intrusive. Documentation of all surveillance activities, including the justification for their initiation and execution, is crucial. Any doubt regarding the legality or ethicality of a proposed technique should prompt consultation with legal counsel or a supervisor before proceeding. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a claims adjuster is reviewing a submitted auto insurance claim. The claimant has provided repair estimates, but the adjuster notices a potential discrepancy between the coverage limit for collision damage stated in the repair estimate and the limit explicitly listed on the policy's declarations page. The adjuster's primary objective is to optimize the claims processing workflow while ensuring regulatory compliance. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of process optimization within the regulatory framework for a certified claims adjuster, CCA? Option A. Proceed with the claim payment based on the repair estimate without further investigation, as the claimant is typically presumed to be acting in good faith. Option B. Inform the claimant that the repair estimate exceeds the policy limit and deny the claim outright without verifying the declarations paid. To avoid further processing time, Option C. Immediately approve the claim based on the repair estimate to expedite payment and maintain a high processing speed, assuming the claimant's estimate reflects the actual damage. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the declarations page, cross-reference the stated coverage limit with the repair estimate, and investigate any discrepancies to ensure accurate claim adjudication and compliance with policy terms. The correct answer is C. Immediately approve the claim based on the repair estimate to expedite payment and maintain a high processing speed, assuming the claimant's estimate reflects the actual damage. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the claims adjuster to balance the need for efficient claims processing with the absolute necessity of adhering to regulatory requirements concerning the declarations page. The declarations page is a foundational document in an insurance policy, providing a summary of key coverage details, limits, deductibles, and named insureds. Errors or omissions on this page can lead to significant disputes, underpayments, or overpayments, and can have legal ramifications. The adjuster must exercise careful judgment to ensure all information is accurate and compliant without causing undue delay. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the declarations page against the submitted claim documentation and policy terms, cross-referencing all critical data points to ensure accuracy and completeness. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate to process claims accurately and in accordance with the policy as evidenced by the declarations page. Regulatory frameworks for claims adjusters, such as those governed by the Certified Claims Adjuster (CCA) designation, emphasize diligence, accuracy, and adherence to policy provisions. Failing to meticulously review the declarations page for discrepancies or errors could lead to a violation of fair claims handling practices, potentially resulting in a breach of contract or regulatory penalties for misrepresentation or improper claims settlement. An incorrect approach that involves solely relying on the initial claim submission without verifying the declarations page is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of the adjuster's duty to accurately assess the claim based on the policy contract. The declarations page is the definitive summary of coverage, and any deviation from it without proper investigation and documentation would be a breach of regulatory requirements for accurate claims handling. Another incorrect approach, which is to assume the declarations page is always accurate and proceed with payment based on the claimant's request, is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the fundamental responsibility of the adjuster to verify information and ensure the claim aligns with the policy's terms and conditions as stated on the declarations page. It risks overpaying claims or paying for coverage not actually in force, leading to financial losses for the insurer and potential regulatory scrutiny for improper claims practices. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy by making a quick determination without a detailed review of the declarations page is a critical failure. While efficiency is desirable, it must never come at the expense of regulatory compliance and accurate claims adjudication. The CCA designation implies a commitment to professional standards that include thoroughness and adherence to all applicable laws and guidelines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic checklist for reviewing the declarations page, comparing it against policy endorsement, claim details, and any supporting documentation. This process should include verifying named insureds, policy numbers, effective dates, coverage types, limits, deductible, and any specific endorsements that modify coverage. If discrepancies are found, the adjuster must follow established procedures for clarification, correction, and communication with the policyholder and insurer, ensuring all actions are documented. Question 15. What factors determine the appropriate handling of a medical claim for a treatment that was not pre-authorized, but is deemed medically necessary by the treating physician, considering the specific terms of the insurance policy and applicable Certified Claims Adjuster (CCA) regulations? Option A. The insurer's internal cost containment targets for medical claims. Option B. The treating physician's recommendation alone, regardless of policy terms or medical necessity. Option C. The sole absence of a pre-authorization number on the submitted claim form. Option D. The extent to which the medical records and physician's documentation support the medical necessity of the treatment, alongside a thorough review of policy provisions for pre-authorization requirements and any exceptions. Correct answer is D. The extent to which the medical records and physician's documentation support the medical necessity of the treatment, alongside a thorough review of policy provisions for pre-authorization requirements and any exceptions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the adjuster must navigate the complexities of medical necessity and coverage limitations while ensuring fair and timely payment for services rendered. The adjuster's judgment directly impacts the claimant's access to necessary care and the insurer's financial exposure, requiring a delicate balance between adherence to policy terms and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the claimant's medical records, the treating physician's documentation, and the specific policy provisions related to the treatment in question. This approach is correct because it aligns with the fundamental principles of claims handling, which mandate that coverage decisions be based on objective evidence and the terms of the insurance contract. Specifically, regulatory frameworks for certified claims adjusters, CCA, emphasize the importance of verifying medical necessity, ensuring that treatments are consistent with accepted medical practice, and that services are not excluded by the policy. This systematic review ensures that payments are made for covered and medically necessary services, preventing both underpayment to the claimant and overpayment by the insurer. An incorrect approach would be to deny the claim solely based on the absence of a pre-authorization, without investigating whether the treatment was medically necessary and otherwise covered. This is ethically and regulatorily unsound because many policies allow for exceptions or retroactive authorization in emergency situations, or when pre-authorization was not feasible. Denying coverage without a comprehensive review of medical necessity and policy terms violates the duty of good faith and fair dealing owed to the insured. Another incorrect approach would be to approve the claim without scrutinizing the medical necessity of the treatment, simply because a physician recommended it. This fails to uphold the adjuster's responsibility to ensure that policy benefits are applied appropriately and that the insurer is not paying for services that are not medically indicated or are experimental and not covered by the policy. This can lead to financial losses for the insurer and potentially set a precedent for covering non-essential treatments. A third incorrect approach would be to delay payment indefinitely while awaiting additional, non-essential documentation that is not critical to determining medical necessity or policy coverage. This can result in undue hardship for the claimant and may violate regulatory requirements for timely claims processing. The adjuster must exercise professional judgment to request only relevant information necessary for a coverage determination. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the claimant's condition and the treatment provided as documented by the healthcare provider. Second, meticulously review the insurance policy to identify relevant coverage provisions, exclusions, and limitations. Third, assess the medical necessity of the treatment based on objective evidence and accepted medical standards. Fourth, communicate clearly and promptly with the claimant and provider regarding any information needed or coverage decisions. Finally, ensure all actions are documented and comply with all applicable regulations and ethical guidelines. Question 16. Examination of the data shows a policyholder's property sustained damage following a severe storm. The policyholder reports that a large tree on their property, weakened by a prior fungal infection, fell onto their house during the storm, causing significant structural damage. The fungal infection predated the storm by several years and had been progressively weakening the tree. Which of the following best represents the analysis of causation for this claim? Option A. The proximate cause of the damage is the policyholder's failure to maintain the tree, as they should have addressed the fungal infection proactively. Option B. The damage is a result of concurrent causes, with both the fungal infection and the storm contributing equally to the loss. Option C. The proximate cause of the damage is the fungal infection, as it directly led to the tree's weakened state, making it susceptible to falling. Option D. The proximate cause of the damage is the severe storm, as it was the immediate and direct event that caused the weakened tree to fall and damage the house. The correct answer is C. The proximate cause of the damage is the fungal infection, as it directly led to the tree's weakened state, making it susceptible to falling. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Claims Adjuster, CCA, to distinguish between a direct cause of loss and a contributing factor, which can be nuanced and subject to interpretation. The adjuster must apply the principles of causation analysis strictly within the defined regulatory framework for the CCA designation, ensuring that their assessment aligns with established legal and insurance principles without introducing external or speculative elements. The core of the challenge lies in accurately identifying the proximate cause of the damage, which is the event that directly and immediately leads to the loss, and differentiating it from events that may have preceded or influenced the loss, but were not the primary trigger. The correct approach involves meticulously tracing the chain of events to identify the proximate cause. This means determining the most direct, efficient, and immediate cause of the loss, as stipulated by the relevant insurance policy terms and conditions, and applicable regulatory guidelines for claims handling. This approach is correct because it adheres to the fundamental principle of indemnity, which aims to restore the insured to their pre-loss financial position based on covered perils. By focusing on the proximate cause, the adjuster ensures that the claim payment is for damages directly resulting from a covered event, thereby upholding the integrity of the insurance contract and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach would be to attribute the loss to a remote or antecedent cause that, while potentially a factor, was not the immediate trigger. This fails to meet the proximate cause standard and could lead to either an unjustified denial of a valid claim or an overpayment for damages not directly caused by a covered peril. Another incorrect approach is to consider concurrent causes without properly evaluating which one was the dominant or proximate cause, potentially leading to misapplication of policy exclusions or coverage. Furthermore, an approach that relies on speculation or assumptions about causation, rather than a thorough investigation of facts and evidence, violates the duty of good faith and fair dealing expected of a CCA, and is contrary to regulatory expectations for objective claims assessment. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with a thorough review of the policy wording and relevant statutes. This is followed by a detailed factual investigation to gather all pertinent information about the loss event. The adjuster then applies the principles of causation analysis, specifically focusing on identifying the proximate cause, considering any intervening or concurrent causes, and evaluating their impact in light of the policy and regulations. This structured approach ensures objectivity, fairness, and compliance, minimizing the risk of errors in claim adjudication. Question 17. When evaluating a new insurance claim, what is the most critical initial step in determining the appropriate risk assessment approach for a potential property damage incident involving a policyholder's vehicle? Option A. Researching the market value of the policyholder's vehicle to establish a baseline for potential repair or replacement costs. Option B. Immediately initiating a detailed inspection of the damaged vehicle to document all visible signs of impact and wear. Option C. Contacting the policyholder's insurance broker to confirm the policy's coverage limits and deductibles. Option D. Ascertaining whether the claim is being filed by the policyholder for damage to their own vehicle, first-party claim, or by another party alleging damage caused by the policyholder's vehicle, third-party claim. The correct answer is D. Ascertaining whether the claim is being filed by the policyholder for damage to their own vehicle, first-party claim, or by another party alleging damage caused by the policyholder's vehicle, third-party claim. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Claims Adjuster, CCA, to distinguish between different types of insurance claims, specifically focusing on the nuances of first-party versus third-party claims, and to understand how the risk assessment process differs for each. The adjuster must apply regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines to ensure fair and accurate claim handling, which directly impacts the insured and potentially other parties. A thorough understanding of claim types is fundamental to applying the correct investigative and assessment methodologies. The correct approach involves accurately categorizing the claim as either first-party or third-party, and then tailoring the risk assessment strategy accordingly. For a first-party claim, the adjuster assesses the loss sustained by the policyholder against the terms of their own policy. For a third-party claim, the adjuster assesses the liability of the insured to a claimant and the extent of that claimant's damages, all within the context of the insured's liability policy. This distinction is critical for determining the scope of investigation, the applicable policy provisions, and the appropriate settlement parameters, aligning with regulatory requirements for prompt and fair claim resolution. An incorrect approach would be to apply a generic risk assessment without first identifying the claim type. This could lead to overlooking crucial policy conditions applicable to first-party claims, or failing to adequately investigate the insured's liability in a third-party scenario. Another incorrect approach is to conflate the roles and responsibilities of the adjuster in first-party versus third-party claims, potentially leading to inappropriate communications with claimants or policyholders, or misapplication of policy limits and deductibles. These failures can result in regulatory violations, such as unfair claims settlement practices and ethical breaches, undermining the integrity of the claims process. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with a clear identification of the claim type upon initial notification. This involves reviewing the claim details, understanding the parties involved, and determining whether the claim is against the policyholder's own coverage, first party, or against the policyholder's liability to another party, third party. Once the claim type is established, the adjuster can then select the appropriate risk assessment framework, investigative techniques, and communication protocols mandated by the relevant regulatory framework and ethical standards for that specific claim type. Question 18. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need for greater clarity on how certified claims adjusters, CCA, should approach the assessment of claims where anatomical and physiological factors are central to the reported injury or illness, particularly concerning the balance between thorough investigation and claimant privacy. When reviewing a claim involving a soft tissue injury to the shoulder, which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical practice for a CCA? Option A. contacting the claimant's employer to inquire about the claimant's physical capabilities in their role, without specific medical authorization. Option B. Conducting an independent physical examination of the claimant to assess the extent of the shoulder injury and its physiological limitations. Option C. Relying solely on the claimant's verbal description of pain and functional limitations without seeking supporting medical documentation. Option D. Requesting detailed medical reports from the claimant's treating physician that outline the diagnosed condition, the physiological impact on the claimant's range of motion and function, and the treatment plan, while ensuring all requests comply with privacy regulations. The correct answer is D. Requesting detailed medical reports from the claimant's treating physician that outline the diagnosed condition, the physiological impact on the claimant's range of motion and function, and the treatment plan, while ensuring all requests comply with privacy regulations. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Claims Adjuster, CCA, to balance the need for thorough investigation with the claimant's right to privacy and timely resolution, all while adhering to specific regulatory frameworks. The adjuster must understand how anatomical and physiological factors can directly impact the assessment of a claim's validity and severity, without overstepping into medical diagnosis or infringing on the claimant's personal health information rights. The CCA's role is to assess the claim based on evidence, not to provide medical opinions. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based review of medical documentation provided by the claimant, focusing on how diagnosed conditions and their physiological manifestations align with the reported incident and claimed damages. This approach is justified by the regulatory framework governing claims adjusting, which mandates fair and impartial investigation, reliance on documented evidence, and adherence to privacy laws. Specifically, the CCA must ensure that any consideration of anatomy and physiology is directly tied to the claim's causation and damages as presented in medical records and expert reports, and that all actions comply with data protection regulations. An incorrect approach would be to independently seek medical opinions or conduct physical assessments of the claimant. This is a regulatory failure because it exceeds the scope of the adjuster's authority, potentially constituting unauthorized practice of medicine. Ethically, it violates the claimant's privacy and autonomy. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the claimant's reported symptoms without adequate medical substantiation, even if they seem unusual. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a thorough and fair investigation, potentially leading to an unfair denial of a legitimate claim. Relying solely on the claimant's subjective description of pain without correlating it to objective medical findings, where available and relevant, also represents a failure to conduct a comprehensive assessment as required by regulatory standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence gathering from authorized sources, such as treating physicians and independent medical examiners, when necessary and permissible. This framework involves clearly defining the scope of the investigation, identifying all relevant medical documentation, and consulting with appropriate medical professionals within the bounds of regulatory and ethical guidelines. The adjuster must maintain a clear distinction between assessing claim-related information and providing medical advice or diagnosis. Question 19. System analysis indicates that a claims adjuster is investigating a property damage claim following a severe storm. The adjuster needs to document the damage to the insured's home. Which of the following approaches best represents a professional and compliant method for photography and videography in this scenario? Option A. Stage photographs or videos to emphasize certain aspects of the damage, or to create a narrative that supports a specific claim outcome, regardless of the actual conditions. Option B. Systematically capture clear, well-lit photographs and video footage focusing on the damaged areas and relevant contextual elements of the property, while being mindful of the insured's privacy and obtaining consent for interior shots where appropriate. Option C. Capture only superficial images of the most obvious damage, neglecting to document the full extent of the loss or any contributing factors that may not be immediately apparent. Option D. Take a large volume of random, poorly focused photographs and videos of the entire property, including the insured's personal belongings and living spaces, without a specific investigative purpose for each shot. The correct answer is B. Systematically capture clear, well-lit photographs and video footage focusing on the damaged areas and relevant contextual elements of the property, while being mindful of the insured's privacy and obtaining consent for interior shots where appropriate. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the claims adjuster must balance the need for thorough documentation to support the claim investigation with the insured's right to privacy and the potential for misinterpretation of visual evidence. The adjuster's judgment is critical in determining what photographic and videographic evidence is relevant, necessary, and ethically obtained. The correct approach involves systematically documenting the damage and surrounding circumstances in a manner that is objective, factual, and respects the insured's property and privacy. This includes capturing clear, well-lit images and video that accurately depict the loss, its extent, and any contributing factors. The adjuster should focus on the damaged areas and relevant contextual elements, avoiding intrusive or irrelevant filming of the insured's personal belongings or living spaces. Obtaining consent where appropriate, especially for interior shots or when the insured is present, is a key ethical consideration. This approach aligns with the Certified Claims Adjuster (CCA) professional standards, which emphasize thoroughness, accuracy, and ethical conduct in evidence gathering. The regulatory framework for claims adjusters, while not explicitly detailing photography techniques, mandates that all investigative actions be conducted with integrity and in a manner that does not prejudice the insured or violate their rights. An incorrect approach would be to take a large volume of random, poorly focused, or excessively intrusive photographs and videos without a clear investigative purpose. This could lead to an overwhelming amount of irrelevant data, potentially include sensitive personal information, and may be perceived as an invasion of privacy by the insured, undermining trust and potentially leading to disputes. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of professionalism and consideration for the insured situation. Another incorrect approach would be to only capture superficial images that do not adequately document the full extent of the damage or relevant contributing factors. This could result in an incomplete investigation, potentially leading to an inaccurate claim assessment and subsequent disputes. This fails to meet the core responsibility of a claims adjuster to conduct a thorough and comprehensive investigation. A further incorrect approach would be to manipulate or stage photographs or videos to support a predetermined outcome. This is a severe ethical and regulatory violation, constituting fraud and undermining the integrity of the entire claims process. It directly contravenes the CCA's duty to act honestly and impartially. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear plan for evidence collection, focusing on relevance and necessity. Adjusters should consider the purpose of each photograph or video, ensuring it directly contributes to understanding the loss. They must also be mindful of privacy considerations and obtain consent when necessary. Maintaining objectivity and accuracy in all documentation is paramount, and any evidence gathered must be handled ethically and in accordance with all applicable regulations and professional standards. Question 20. Regulatory review indicates that when a vehicle is declared a total loss, the insurer must settle the claim based on the actual cash value, ACV, of the vehicle immediately prior to the loss. In evaluating the ACV, which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of fair claims settlement and regulatory compliance for determining the ACV of a totaled vehicle? Option A. Prioritizing the lowest-priced comparable vehicle found within a wide geographic area, regardless of its condition or specific options. Option B. Utilizing a broad range of comparable vehicles, adjusting for differences in mileage, condition, options, and geographic location to establish a market value. Option C. Selecting a single comparable vehicle that is readily available, without detailed consideration of its specific condition or features relative to the insured vehicle. Option D. Relying exclusively on the vehicle's original purchase price, adjusted only for inflation. The correct answer is B. Utilizing a broad range of comparable vehicles, adjusting for differences in mileage, condition, options, and geographic location to establish a market value. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Claims Adjuster (CCA) to navigate the complexities of total loss evaluation while adhering strictly to the regulatory framework governing total loss settlements. The core challenge lies in ensuring the settlement accurately reflects the actual cash value (ACV) of the damaged vehicle, as mandated by regulations, without resorting to methods that could be perceived as unfair or non-compliant. The adjuster must balance the insurer's obligation to indemnify the policyholder with the policyholder's right to a fair settlement. The correct approach involves a comparative analysis of comparable vehicles, focusing on those that are the same make, model, and year, with similar mileage, condition, and options, sold or available within a reasonable geographic proximity to the insured's location. This method is correct because it directly aligns with the regulatory requirement to establish the ACV of the vehicle. By considering multiple comparable vehicles, the adjuster can derive a reliable market value, ensuring the settlement is neither an overpayment nor an underpayment, thereby fulfilling the insurer's duty to indemnify and complying with fair claims handling practices. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the vehicle's original purchase price fails because the ACV is determined by current market conditions, not historical cost. Depreciation due to age, mileage, and wear and tear significantly impacts the vehicle's value. This approach would likely result in an underpayment to the policyholder, violating the principle of indemnification and potentially breaching regulatory requirements for fair settlement. Another incorrect approach that uses a single comparable vehicle without considering its specific attributes, e.g., condition, mileage, options, is also problematic. This can lead to an inaccurate ACV if the chosen vehicle is not truly representative of the insured's vehicle. It risks an arbitrary valuation and may not satisfy the regulatory standard for a well-supported ACV determination. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes the lowest available comparable vehicle price without adjusting for differences in condition or features ignores the nuances of market valuation. This can lead to an unfair settlement for the policyholder, as it does not account for the specific value-adding or detracting elements of the insured's vehicle. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of all available comparable vehicles. The adjuster must identify vehicles that are as similar as possible to the insured's vehicle in terms of key attributes. Adjustments should be made for any significant differences in mileage, condition, features, and options to arrive at a truly representative ACV. Documentation of the comparable vehicles used, the adjustments made, and the rationale for the final ACV determination is crucial for regulatory compliance and to demonstrate fair claims handling.